Hey everyone, so this is Valerie at CaughtMyEyeCandy on Instagram, and I also run the Lotus Lamp Lovers group on Facebook. Today I thought I would share with you all of these petals because it seems like in the group there's been a lot of questions and confusion about, what type of petals are what can I put on my lamp, what can I not put on my lamp. So I thought, well, I have all of these in the workshop, I'd go over it. So as far as petals go, generally you'll find two categories, what I call an inner petal and an outer petal. These are all inner petals lined up here. They have a wave to them like this, a curve. And that's how you know it's an inner style petal. These tend to fit in almost any inner frame, but not sometimes they can be a little bit thinner. Like for example, this one is slimmer than this one. Let's see. So it's a little slimmer. It can still work usually, but you just have to be a bit mindful of that. Generally, they're all roughly the same size. And then we have what we call an outer petal, which would be, I don't have the standard size currently. I have this, what I call the slim size, and this is what I call the wide size. And there's a size in between for outer petals. And that is generally, if you're gonna find an outer petal, it's gonna be that size. What I do have is a frame for it currently. So let's use the frame as an example here. So see, this is much slimmer. So that's why I call this the slim size. If you have slim petals, you cannot buy the standard size outer petal. It won't work with these frames. I mean, unless you're really crafty, you can somehow break this frame and shrink it down maybe, but just in regular fitting, it's not gonna fit. Similarly, a wide petal will not fit in one of these outer frames. This is the standard size. Now, the thing about the outer petals, and you'll see why they aren't interchangeable with the inner petals, is they don't have that same, they have a slight curve, but they don't have the wave like this one does. So if you're buying petals, I would say ask for measurements and ask to have a picture on the side if they don't include one, because that'll determine. Sometimes in the pictures from a straight on, it's not as clear. So you just want to be mindful of that. Now, let's see what else. Yes, inner and outer petals. The reason I call them inner, even though sometimes these are used as outer petals in some of them. So for example, here, like I said, we have the outer frame. See, it has that curve, but not that wave. But a lot of frames are this style. This is an outer frame, but it uses what I technically would call an inner petal. See, it has that curvy wave. If you have a lamp that has this, you're in luck because it's a lot easier to replace and move around petals if they're all the same size, the inner and the outer. You have more, room to play around with how you want to configure if you're replacing petals with ones that aren't identical. So here we have an example of an outer frame, but technically has inner petals. Here's another example of that. And then we have the wide, you have to excuse me here. I'm in the middle of trying to fix up lamps as I usually am. And there's just petals absolutely everywhere currently. So here we have an example of an outer. This is what I call the wide petal. So this is an outer. And another thing you'll notice now that I've seen it is this has what I call etching. And then there's a replacement petal that does not have it. So that's something to keep in mind too. I don't mind. I think it's close enough. And because they're vintage, it's so hard to find. I'd be perfectly happy with petals that don't match with etching because the color's close enough. But that's another thing you'll notice. Some petals have this etching and some don't. They're smooth, plain, whatever you'd like to call it. So they're all vintage, these ones. Some of the newer repros also mostly just have etchings like this. You don't tend to find, at least I never have seen a non-vintage petal that's smooth like this. But just because it's etched does not mean it's not vintage. It's sort of those, you know it when you see it, when you've been working with them long enough. So I'm always happy to answer any questions if someone's not sure if they have a repro. Now, as far as the colors go, there's a wide range of colors here, and I don't even have all of them, but here we've got what I call the smoky color, and this has a solid backing. Let's see. So there's that. And then we've got, actually this one's also, oh, this is the matching one, the inner to this one. See, these are solid on the back. But the colored glass itself is dark. It's not clear like this one. Like that, see here, there's color, but then here is clear. On this one, it's dark and the glass itself is dark. Then we have another similar one, which is smoky but clear. So technically, see, there's no solid backing on this one. It's just the frosting and the etching. Again, I mean, if I only found a replacement that was like this, I'd be quite happy because they're similar enough. You'd have to be really paying close attention to notice. And then of course we get into the sort of clear blush pink colors. That's another thing, is there's a lot of ranges of pink. We've got this color pink. These three are very similar in pink. I would say they're nearly identical. But as you see, they're all a little different. This is one slimmer than this one. This one has a curved instead of flat. It doesn't usually matter much. Usually, you know, again, if you can replace, the inner frames have some leeway. They're usually, I'll show you. Inner frames usually have a little leeway, a little bit of a gap, so they're a little bit more flexible and being able to fit in a petal. If worse comes to worse, I mean, you can always, I guess, glue them in or figure out something if you buy a petal that doesn't quite fit. But generally, you have a fair amount of leeway with these. So these are all about the same shade of pink, I would say. This wide petal is also about the same shade of pink. But then we get into the slightly darker colors, as you'll notice. This is still what I would classify as like a blushy pink, but it is darker. It's a bit darker than this. Again, I'd be happy to mix these into this if this was all I could find. And it's really hard to tell color on, you know, video or pictures when you're buying online. So we just have to accept that sometimes it's not going to quite match. And then, for example, we have these two. These are much more similar in color. This petal is quite rare. I've hardly found any that's this stripy color, but these are about the same. So again, if you could only find these, that'd be quite a nice match to replace, even if they're not identical. You could always, if you're ambitious, you could, with a little gold paint pen, draw it to match. And then we have this much darker pink. I would still personally classify this as like, well, actually, no, sorry, this is the darker pink, I think. Actually, one second, let me see. This might be the medium pink. Let's grab the frame it came from and see if these match. These are a match. So I would classify, no, that is slightly darker actually. So this is what I would call a medium pink actually. This is a medium pink color. This is like the darker. These tend to be the repro ones that you see, but again, I've seen vintage in this style too. So I suspect what's going on is a lot of these companies made them back in the day and started making them again, and the methods are almost identical for production. So I would say, I personally wouldn't be too concerned if you're getting repro or not. They're almost exactly the same construction. It's more about the petals than anything else. So we've got this much darker color. This is what I would classify as a medium pink, and this is the darker pink. So yeah, as you can see, and I mean, again, this isn't even everything. There's quite a wide range of colors and styles, and that's not even getting into all the different types of etching. And oh, you know what I just found? I do have an outer petal. I have one outer petal, so now I can show you. This is what I would call the standard outer petal size. So here you've got the slim, the standard, and the wide. These are the three petal sizes that I've ever come across. Of course, it's a wide world out there, so there might be more that I'm not aware of, but see, slim, smaller, wide. They don't have the wave. This is the wave, no wave there. This is an outer petal. You have to get the right frame, the right size, etc., for these. So these are harder to source because of that, unfortunately. All right, let's see, what else could we talk about while I have all of these here? We've got frames, as I mentioned, and frames also come in a variety of colors. Some of that is just the way they were manufactured. For example, this is a standard outer frame. This is a standard slim outer frame, and this is not corrosion. This is just how it came. This is more of like what I would call a oil rubbed bronze finish, and this was how it came from the factory. This, on the other hand, looks like it's patinaed into this color. You can sort of tell because it's uneven. Still pretty, and I've never minded the patina on them, but something to be aware of. You can always paint them if you would rather them be this very strong gold like this one. This is what's called new old stock. I found them in box technically new, even though they're vintage, but see, because they were kept in the box, they're still basically pristine. That's what the finish looked like, almost brand new. All right, now what else can we discuss? These pliers. These are my favorite kind for removing petals, because as you'll see, there's two places where you can remove them, from here or from here. I tend to like to remove them from here more, so you take the plier, you lift up on this, just because these have a tendency to break, and once they break, it's a lot more difficult to keep your petal in place. That's why a lot of them end up broken when you find vintage ones that are missing petals. A lot of the time it's because one of these prongs has snapped off. The petal isn't being held in place anymore and it falls and breaks. So that's my recommendation, but you know, sometimes you do have to shift these around a little if this doesn't want to come out. Just be really slow and careful when you lift up the prongs. to try to avoid. I mean, sometimes it's unavoidable. They're old vintage lamps, you know, there's always have quirks. There's always a quirk you have to deal with. Something to be aware of. I think that's about everything. The last couple of things we can discuss are number of petals. Generally, almost every type of lamp I've ever seen has 6 per inner and outer frame. This has 6, this has 6. The one exception that I've seen is the style that has these wide outer ones. This generally has 5, and the inner that it comes with also generally has 5, and these tend to be a little wider as well. If you'll notice, these are almost identical in the etching, but they're a little wider. Probably still make it work, but it is a little bit of a wider petal. Since it has only 5, I guess they made it wider to accommodate. So that's another thing to be mindful of when you're purchasing parts, is how many petals does the frame have, etc., etc. Let's see, we also have these little rings, thread collars, I think they're called. Sometimes if you look at these, it can give you an indication of who manufactured them. It's hard to see. I don't think this one has it, but there's writing on them. These are pretty standard. You should be able to buy these on Amazon if you can't. If your lamp comes without them, you can probably buy these. Probably one of the easiest things on these lamps to replace is those collars. And then what else do we have to discuss here? Etchings. So the etchings themselves, this is generally what I call the standard etching design. It's almost like, it's not quite a grapes, but I'm not quite sure what I would call it, but it's got these little dots, these little flourishes, dots, flourishes. And as you'll notice on this wide one, it's a similar kind of design, obviously slightly different. This is much wider. And even on this, as you can see, even this has this sort of etching, and they're all slightly different. They tend to be slightly different on these. You have that, this isn't etched on, this is painted on. I have seen etchings that are completely different than these, an entirely different style. I've never come across them in the wild, but they do exist. So, yeah, I think that's everything that I wanted to talk about today. I have a lot of petals that I need to go through and fix and put on lamps. So yeah, I hope this was helpful. If you guys have any questions or anything like that, you can always contact me.